afternoon. This case is about this defendant's rage against his wife that culminated in him physically assaulting both her as well as a friend of hers. This defendant and Andrea Kennedy Lacroix were married and had been for several years. During the course of their relationship, this defendant started to become convinced that Andrea Kennedy Lacroix was cheating on him with a male coworker, and that made him angry. That made him very angry. And that anger spilled over into physical abuse on June 12th of 2012. That's what this trial is about, the physical abuse by this defendant towards Andrea Kennedy Lacroix. And in the course of that abuse, this defendant committed these offenses. The first person that you're going to hear from in this trial is someone by the name of Shannon Policano. She's going to explain to you that she has, for a long time, been a close friend of Andrea Kennedy Lacroix. That they used to be very close, but as they grew up, got married, Shannon had children, things got in the way, they started to grow a little distant, as people do, despite the fact that they lived only about a mile from each other at the time of this. She'll describe for you that at one point, maybe roughly a year or so before this, they actually ran into each other at a function. I believe the function was at church. And she'll say that that kind of rekindled their friendship. And there was a series of text messages that happened after that, and they kind of reunited or reconnected. And you'll hear how that recent connection caused the unexpected to happen on the night of June 12th of 2012. And the unexpected was Andrea Kennedy Lacroix showing up at night, at about 8:50 at night, in the driveway outside of Shannon Policano's house, frantic, upset, hysterical, crying, calling her name. She'll explain to you that at first, the person was so upset, she couldn't even tell who it was, and she asked who it was. And then Shannon will tell you that Andrea said that it was her, that it was Andrea, and as soon as she said that, she recognized that it was in fact this friend that she had recently connected, that she hadn't seen in a long time. She'll describe that she opened the door, and she'll describe what Andrea Kennedy looked like at that point. How she was disheveled, how she was upset, how she was crying, how she was complaining of back pain, how she clearly was favoring her back, how she had a fat lip, how there was actually blood in the corner of that fat lip. And she'll describe for you how at that moment she asked Andrea what happened, and Andrea Kennedy Lacroix said, "Tom just beat the shit out of me." That would be the phrase that she's going to say that she said, that Tom just beat the shit out of me. And that Andrea Kennedy Lacroix was there for help. Help from Shannon Policano. Help that Shannon Policano tried to give her. By helping her wash the blood off her mouth, by giving her ice, by trying to calm her down, by trying to figure out what to do, by taking Andrea Kennedy Lacroix to the Maynard police station, by trying to get her inside the Maynard police station, and then ultimately by trying to take her back to her own residence, meaning the Lacroix residence, about a mile up the road in Maynard, Massachusetts, together, so that Andrea could get all of the things that she had left that house without. All of the things such as her such as her house keys. She had only left with a single key on a key fob to drive her car. So she needed to get her house keys. She needed to get her phone. She wanted to get some clothes. And so they made the decision to go back to the Lacroix house that night for Andrea to be able to get those things. That was a pivotal decision, because that was the wrong decision. And Shannon will tell you why that was the wrong decision. And Shannon will tell you and will describe for you how wrong that decision really was. How when they got there, the garage door was open. How they entered in through the garage, went up the stairs to go into the kitchen, how Andrea ended up getting the spare key to open the door, how they ended up opening the door to go into the kitchen to get the things, and the defendant saw Andrea, and came after Andrea. And Shannon will describe for you that came after her, as she called it, fists flying. But then those fists were checked upon the realization that Andrea was not alone, that there was Shannon, and she was there. But at that point then, the verbal abuse and the threat started, towards Andrea, towards Shannon for being there. But then Andrea reached for her phone, her phone that was actually still in the defendant's hand at that point, and Andrea reached for her phone. The defendant became visibly enraged, or was visibly enraged on Andrea, and he grabbed her. And he grabbed her and he held on to her. And this was despite Shannon Policano being there at that point. And Shannon will describe for you that after grabbing her, the defendant, still visibly upset, took Andrea Kennedy and actually slammed the back of her head on a counter. And she'll describe that when she saw that, she actually stepped forward to intervene. That Shannon actually stepped forward towards where Tom Lacroix, this defendant, was actually still holding Andrea Kennedy down. And at that point, the defendant turned to her, and the abuse started to go to her, and he started to go towards her. She'll describe for you that she had to get away from him. She actually had to get away to keep him from touching her, and she started to walk backwards. And when she started to walk backwards, there's actually the stairs, the little stairway, maybe 6 steps or so, that they had just come up to go into the kitchen. She actually tripped down the last couple of those stairs, trying to get away from the onslaught of this defendant. She'll tell you the defendant actually never touched her because she was able to get down those stairs, and she actually tripped down those stairs. She'll tell you what the defendant was saying, how the defendant was threatening her. She'll tell you how the defendant was also threatening his wife at that time, Andrea Kennedy Lacroix. She'll tell you that that verbal abuse kept up, included the threats, and included the threat of what he would do to her if she told anyone about what she had just witnessed him do to Andrea Kennedy Lacroix. But at that point, when the defendant's attention was starting to focus on Shannon, Andrea actually then started to come forward, and the defendant's attention went back to Andrea. And he grabbed Andrea again. Now they're all in that garage, which is at the bottom of that stairway. And once again, the defendant still had that phone in his hand, still had Andrea's phone in his hand, and Andrea reached for it. She attempted to get the phone. She put her hand up, trying to get the phone, and the defendant grabbed her. Once again, picked her up and threw her into the wall where a bike rack was. There was a bike rack up on the wall and there was a bike on it. Literally, physically up, off the ground, and into that bike rack that's on the wall. Shannon will describe for you, she'll describe for you what it sounded like, what it looked like, and at that point, when that happened, Andrea started screaming, "Run, run, run," and the two of them fled. And the two of them ran back out to their car, which was Shannon's car at that time. Andrea went to the passenger side, Shannon went to the driver's side. She instinctively locks the door when she gets out, so she was trying to get her door unlocked. The defendant followed them, but they were able to get inside the vehicle, and they were able to flee. She'll describe for you that despite what the defendant chasing them, they were able to flee and went back to the Maynard Police Department, where they had just been prior to that pivotal decision to go to the house to pick up Andrea's stuff. But this time she'll describe for you how they didn't go in. She'll describe for you how they sat in the parking lot and why they sat in the parking lot. The fact that they were too scared to go inside because there was consequences. Different consequences for different people, but she'll tell you about what she feared her consequences to be. That she feared what would happen to her if she went inside because of what the defendant had said to her. Because he said he knew where she lived, and he said that he would kill her if she told anyone. And that threat worked, because she didn't go inside. And she didn't tell the police that because of what the defendant said. And instead, they turned around and they drove away. And they went back to Shannon's house. But she'll describe for you that Andrea couldn't even stay, or wouldn't even stay, at Shannon's house that night. She actually left, got in her car, and left with her car, and ended up going back to the house with the defendant that night. But just because Shannon Policano and Andrea Kennedy Lacroix didn't go back into the police station that night after this second assault that had happened, does not mean that the police did not become aware that something happened.